All right, well, hello and welcome to Chapter 2 of our text. We're going to be looking at claims, issues, and arguments, just the first 20 pages. So let's go ahead and get into it. The last one was longer than I thought. All right, our goals for this lecture are to understand what an argument is as well as its basic components. Argument in this class is a technical term. It's going to refer to something specific that you won't normally be referring to in casual speech. So we're going to define what that is, and I'm going to give you a definition for it and all of its components, its parts. All right, we're also going to try and nail down what an argument is supposed to do and when you can consider it successful or not. And let's see, then we're going to look at practicing recognizing arguments in regular English speech. As a matter of fact, we're not accustomed to speaking in arguments. Usually, all of our arguments are implicit and need to be inferred from our speech. If you take a transcript of, even the way I'm talking to you now, and I'm trying to be very specific and point by point, but if you take the transcripts of a regular conversation, you probably won't have a premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, conclusion format. So we're going to start looking on how to go from casual speech to argument form. And then the last thing we're going to do in this lecture is introduce the if-then statement and talk about what it is, when it's true, when it's false. Okay? All right. So what is a statement? Now, a statement here I take to be a proposition about the world that is capable of being true or false. So anytime I say something and it could be true or it could be false, then I've given you a statement. And what I mean here by about the world is not necessarily a physical statement, it's about existence. So when I say world here, I'm referring to anything that could exist, anything you could even talk about. So when I talk about my opinions, I could be making statements. When I say, I am of the opinion that pistachio ice cream is delicious, that's a statement, right? Because I could be lying to you. I don't know why I would lie to you about ice cream, but I could be lying to you. That could be a false statement. So that would qualify. So let's look at these points here. And I want you to tell me which one are statements and which ones aren't. I want you to tell me, but you can't tell me. So pause the moment. Pause the video and just take a moment to look at these and gauge your initial reaction as to whether or not these are statements. All right, let's take them, let's look at them. All right, Spencer is 38 years old. That's a statement, absolutely. It's either true or it's false, right? It's a statement about my age. As a matter of fact, it's false. I am about 10 years younger than that. Okay? So, how about this next one? How are you? That is not a statement. That can't be false or true. Imagine if you were coming up to meet a friend and they're like, oh, how are you? And you said, liar. It wouldn't make any sense. So that's a question. In response, you would give them a statement. Oh, I'm fine. You could be telling the truth, or you could be lying about that. But the question itself, any question, cannot be a statement. And I'm going to skip over, I'm going to come back to these, but I want to tell you right now, why is this important? Why are we even talking about statements? Why is it important to know what is and is not a statement? It's because arguments are composed of only statements. Arguments go from proposition to proposition, proposition from proposition to conclusion. They only operate on statements. So it's important to recognize in your own speech and in your own writing when you are not using statements. So I was once talking with someone, we were having an argument that got a little heated. I'm sorry, we weren't having an argument, we were yelling at each other. We're going to define what an argument is here in a bit. But the person eventually said, "Come on, give me a break with that, that's ridiculous." Well, come on, give me a break. Those are not statements. Take a minute, determine whether or not those are statements. Try to explain to yourself whether or not, why those are not statements. So those aren't statements because they're commands. Just like this one here, do your homework early. That's a command. That can't be true or false. Again, if I told you, sit down, you couldn't respond, liar, or you couldn't respond, I see the truth of that. So we use these, though. We say things like, come on, and we say things like, are you serious, when we're having arguments with people. And we use them because they're effective rhetorically. You can get someone to be quiet and shut up and act cowed if you say these kind of things like, come on, are you really being serious with me right now? A person will double think, right? They'll question themselves, they'll doubt themselves, and they might end up agreeing with you. But as we discussed in the last lecture, they wouldn't be agreeing with you for a reason that has anything to do with truth. They're agreeing with you because you're a good orator. Okay, so if you have a good argument, it's going to be composed of statements, so you need to know what is and is not a statement. How about this? You have a test in this class, and you must take it between August 11th and August 13th. Well, that is, yes, it is a statement. As a matter of fact, it's two. The first statement is you have a test in this class. That can be true or false. And the second statement is you must take the test, between the 11th and 13th of August. So that is actually a complex statement. I think we talk about that in week 4. But this part could be false, this part could be false, this part could be true, this part could be true, this part could be false, this part could be true. But the whole thing itself is also a statement. I already explained, do your homework early is not a statement. How about this? Neko ga kawaii. That's another language, right? You have no idea whether or not that's a statement. So that could be gobbledygook, right? That could not make any sense to you. But the reason why you can't understand it as a statement is because you have no idea what these sounds and words and symbols are supposed to claim about the world. As a matter of fact, it says that cat, or cats are cute. I speak a little Japanese, and that's the best I know. Alright, but we need to move on. The last one took too long. Alright, in this last one, I promised to give you $5, or I promise to give you $5. Which one is a statement and which one isn't? So I'm not going to answer this, which one is the statement and which one isn't. I want you guys to think about that on your own and let me know what you think. You can put it in comments or on the forum, but take a moment, teach yourself. Okay. So I've already told you that arguments are composed of statements, but now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what an argument is. So an argument is supposed to be a logical attempt to provide evidence for a particular statement that it's true by showing how that statement, how that proposition about the world is related to other propositions. So here are the three parts. An argument is going to have a premise, it's going to have conclusions, a conclusion, and it's going to have a logical inference. Okay? Now the book actually says you can have an argument with one premise. I disagree. When we look at fallacies, remind me to talk about begging the question. Any argument with one premise is going to be fallacious. It's going to beg the question. So Remind me to explain that when we get there on fallacies. But okay, I think premise and conclusion are relatively straightforward. Let's just make sure we understand what logical inference is. So a logical inference is just going to be the shape of an argument. And sometimes the premises and conclusions can be connected in the right way so that the truth of the premises guarantees the truth of the conclusion, or sometimes it can be structured in a way that isn't going to do that. So when we looked at the arguments of Emilio and Juanita last time, as a matter of fact, both of them had correct logical inferences. The problem was just that their premises were not true. Okay, so here's how it's different, right? An argument is this technical thing. These are the parts of it. And we're used to thinking an argument is just when two people are yelling at each other. Now, there's probably an argument involved. There are probably a couple of arguments. But the yelling at each other part, that's not what an argument is, not in this class. So here's a sample one. The moon is made of cheese. Premise 2, if the moon is made of cheese, we can end world hunger. Conclusion, we can end world hunger. All right. Now that's a silly argument, but it is an argument, right? There are premises, there's a conclusion, and there's definitely a logical connection between the premises and the conclusion. Well, the problem here is that neither of these premises are really true, right? So first of all, the moon is not made of cheese. And second of all, even if it were, I don't know how that would affect our ability to solve world hunger, because we can't really get cheese from the moon down to Earth. All right, so that's another way of looking at the argument here. The logical inference was valid. It was a good logical inference. The conclusion, the premise, however, both premises were false. Both of these are false. So what I've done here is I've just put these into symbols real quick so we can see. I think this makes it clear that the logic is valid here. It's A implies B, therefore B, right? That makes total sense. The only trouble is A is false in this case, and A implies B is false in this case. But here's a more serious one. Premise 1, we believe that all human persons have a right to basic education. Premise 2, non-citizens residing in the U.S. are human persons. Conclusion, therefore, all non-citizens residing in the U.S. have a right to basic education. What about this one? So this is a simple argument as well. It's in roughly the same form as this one is up here. So the logical inference is correct. The only trouble is whether or not these premises are true, right? This one, premise 2, is certainly true. Premise 1, maybe there are some people who disagree. But the neat thing about critical thinking is that if you agree that premise 1 and premise 2 are true, you should also agree with me that the conclusion is true. I'm making a moral normative claim here. You should agree with me. The conclusion is true if you also agree premise 1, premise 2 are true. All right. Next, let's look at the issue here. Now, when Dowden points out issue, what he's talking about is what the argument is trying to solve. The way I have come at this is to establish the point of an argument as determining whether or not conclusions are true. So when Dowden talks about what's at issue, he's talking about what I'll be saying is simply the conclusion, whether or not the conclusion is true. And I think you'll find that that more or less fits with Dowden's explanation of what an issue is. So the important thing in an argument is to not get lost and to remember what it is that you're trying to solve. That's not such a bad thing if you're just sitting around talking with friends, but if you're having a legitimate argument with someone, you can't lose sight of the issue because you're actually trying to convince people of something. So I recognize this a lot in politics. My example is the way Democrats and Republicans often talk to each other. So I write that currently it is popular to point out that Republicans' handling of health care is very similar to what Republicans said was bad about the handling of Obamacare. Well, okay, that shows that there is some hypocrisy there, but that doesn't tell us anything about whether or not the Republicans are handling health care well or poorly. It could be the case that Obamacare was handled well, and it could be the case that it was handled poorly. So this just means that if you actually think there is a problem in the way politicians are behaving, it's not enough to show that they're being hypocritical. You need to address what they are saying and doing right now and point out problems with that. If what they're doing is hypocritical, then maybe they could just disavow their past selves. I'm like, well, I was wrong in the past, now I'm holding to it. Right? So we don't want to lose sight of the issue, and that's very easy to do in regular life. I'm going to go ahead and skip the concept checks listed on page 29 and 30 just because I want to go ahead and move on. We're already at about 20 minutes, and you've got these in the book. So this would be a great thing to make a post about if you're interested. But I can't let this go. His section on what is a proof, I don't like what he says. Dowden writes that basically, though, a proof is a convincing argument, an argument that should convince your audience, not simply an argument that does convince them. Now, what Dowden's getting at here is something I've said before, is that I might accept your claims for reasons that have nothing to do with truth. After all, if you hold a gun to my head and say, do you believe that my favorite color is blue, I'll say whatever you want me to say, and I won't base it on truth. But I think that Dowden is being a little too lenient here, a little too loose with his use of the word proof. Proof shows that your conclusion is true and must be true. There is no other way. Given the truth of our premises, our conclusion must be true. So you get that in math all the time. You can prove that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. If you give a definition of 2 and a definition of 4 and a definition of addition and equality, there's no way you can logically disagree with that. It's impossible to disagree, and that's what proof means. And sometimes you can get that in logic as well. So let's see, where was it? Here. So A therefore B, conclusion B, you can prove that this logical form is valid. I can prove to you, we're going to do it, I think, in week 3 or 4, I can't recall. But we are going to prove that B is always true as long as A is true, and A therefore B is true. Okay? So he says that it's an argument that should convince you. I'm going to claim in response that any inductive argument can never be proven. We're going to talk about inductive arguments next week, but an argument about an empirical fact is an inductive argument. So when I say that it's sunny outside, how do you know this? How can you prove this? Well, you might say, well, just look outside. And I say, oh yeah, I look outside and I see that it is sunny, but just because I'm seeing that it's sunny doesn't mean that it actually is sunny. I could be having a delusion. So to prove to me that it's sunny outside, you would have to prove that I'm not having a delusion. And this would keep going and going and going for every factual claim that you made. So here, let's have fun. Try to come up with a factual claim that you think you know. And I'll try to cast doubt on it. So go ahead and, I don't know, make a forum post on the island. That would be fun. Say, all right, here's a claim about facts, an empirical claim that I think we can prove to be true. And I will try my best to cast some possible doubt on it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't believe it. So what science does is it shows that things are likely true. It makes logical guesses based on the evidence, which is our experience and what we see. And you can make claims that are reasonable, and you can make claims that are pretty strong, and you can be pretty confident about. but you can't prove a single thing that way. And that's fine. We just need to understand that a lot of argument doesn't work in proof. All right. So this is a section on indicators. So here's an argument. I like burritos. Chipotle has burritos. I will like Chipotle. That's an argument, and maybe you can imagine that I'm talking about Chipotle in real life, but no one would talk like this, right? I mean, maybe you have a friend who's learned English from a textbook and they're still not fluent yet. Maybe they would speak like that. I probably speak like that in Japanese. But no fluent speaker would say, I like burritos. Chipotle has burritos. I will like a Chipotle. Okay? That's a good argument form, but it's not standard English. So take a moment, pause the video, and try to use the premises that Dowden gives you from the book, or sorry, the indicators that Dowden gives you from the book, and rewrite this argument. So rewrite this argument using Dowden's indicators. Okay? All right. Let's see what I came up with. So I used these indicators, and this is what I got. Given that I like burritos, and one cannot doubt that Chipotle has burritos, it follows that I will like Chipotle. This is better, right? That's a little bit more natural than this, but that's still kind of weird, right? So here's my attempt at a totally natural way of expressing that argument. Yeah, I'm rather fond of burritos. Wow, found. I can never do anything without a typo. Okay. Yeah, I'm rather fond of burritos. I ate them a lot as a kid. You know, I heard there's a burrito restaurant nearby. It's become pretty famous. What's it called? Oh yeah, Chipotle. Well, we should give that a try. I might like it. Yeah, that sounds pretty natural, right? But if this is the way we're used to speaking, we have to start getting comfortable going from language like this to thinking about the premises and conclusion like this. All right? That's going to be pretty challenging. It's going to be something we're going to keep working on. It's something that I keep working on, but it is going to be something that I want you to get better at. All right? So this is something we can think about. So for standard form, I just want to look at his concept check. Okay, sorry, that was page 39. The concept check asks you to rewrite the following explicit argument in standard form. Even though you might be tempted, never pick up a recently killed rattlesnake because its nerve reflexes enable it to bite for some time after death. Right? That sounds pretty reasonable. If someone said that to you, you would probably agree. All right, but what is the conclusion here? So what I would advise doing to find the conclusion is to try to identify what the speaker is trying to convince you of. What is this person trying to get you to believe or do? Right? Never pick up a recently killed rattlesnake. That's what they want you to take from this. So that's going to be the conclusion. What are the reasons? What are the premises that are provided here? Is it even though you might be tempted? Not really. That's not even a full, complete statement. That's just a part of a phrase. It seems like the only premise that's given is, and here's our indicator, because its nerve reflexes enable it to bite for some time after death. Let's look down here. Well, there you go. We did it. But this is a weird argument, right? I'm supposed to go from the nerve reflexes of a recently killed rattlesnake enable it to bite for some time after death to you should never pick up a recently killed rattlesnake. Well, I don't know. Maybe this sounds intuitive to you. Maybe this is understandable. But I'm confused because I don't see the connection between a rattlesnake can bite and I shouldn't pick it up. There needs to be at least one more premise that says something about what I should do or what I want to do. So Dowden writes that right here. One implicit assumption here is that you don't want to be bitten. Another is that you should act in a way that avoids what you don't want. So if we were to make this into a full argument, we would need both of those things as extra premises. And that's another thing to look out for too. there's going to be a lot of unspoken premises in our speech. So for example, I'm going to stick with Fetty Wap again. For example, if I said, you should listen to Fetty Wap's new single, it's really good. Well, there's kind of an argument there, right? I want you to do something. I want you to listen to it. I gave you a reason. There's a premise. It's a good album. But does that convince you? Do you feel like, therefore, you should go out and listen to Fetty Wap's music? Well, probably not. You probably want to hear some more reasons about what good is and why you should listen to what I think is good music, right? Okay, let's move on. So the last thing that we're going to be covering here in this lecture is the conditional statements of if-then. Now I write that an if-then statement is called conditional. And the reason why we call it a conditional statement is because when we say if A then B, A is a condition that if met will ensure that B will happen. So if there's fire, then there's smoke. We can think of fire being as a condition for smoke. Once that condition is met, then smoke is definitely going to happen. So let's take this phrase. If you love me, then you will call me every day. So what is the condition, and which is the consequence of the condition being met? Well, this is pretty much straight from the definition I give up here. The condition is you loving me, and the consequence that I'm saying is you'll call me every day, right? So the idea is that from your love is supposed to spring the result of you calling your partner every day, right? Once the condition is met, you loving them, then that other thing must happen. So here's my question. But suppose I call you every day. Does that guarantee that I love you? No, it doesn't. So this is a conditional statement. A is the condition for B, does not guarantee that B is a condition for A. After all, I could be calling you every day and still not be loving you at all. I could be lying about that, right? Yeah, so that was a little sad. So the last thing that we need to point out here is that this statement, if A then B, does not claim anything about whether A is true or whether B is true. So when you make an if-then statement, you're not saying anything yet about which of them are true, if any. The only thing you're saying is that there's a logical connection between A and B, such that if A as a condition is met, then B will happen, right? So this could be totally true, and I could also not love you and not call you every day. This statement could still be true. Does that make sense? If not, go ahead and write a comment, write a question, get someone else to answer it or talk about it, because that is going to be important as we go on. All right, I want us to look at this concept check, so let's do that. So here it is, the concept check on 43. So Dowden asks you to say, answer yes, no, or not, yes or no to these conditional claims. I'm going to talk about this as true or false to these conditional claims, okay? So, if it's an apple, then it's a fruit. True or false? Yeah, this is going to be true because all apples are fruits, right? So if I can identify something as an apple, then that's going to guarantee that it's a fruit. Yeah? I can already imagine someone begging to differ and saying, oh, well, it could be a wax apple, right? All right. Fair enough. But a wax apple is not a real apple, yeah? So let's imagine if it's a real apple, then it's a fruit. All right, how about the reverse? If it's a fruit, then it's an apple. Hopefully, you understand pretty quickly that this doesn't follow. It's an apple if it's a fruit. Ooh, so here we got tricky, right? Here we have an if-then statement, but it's not if A then B. It's actually, in this case, B if A. Now, I gave you the answer here by telling you B if A, but it's something that you're going to have to be able to do for yourself to figure out which one of these is the condition and which one of them is what we'll call the consequent. All right, so it's a fruit if it's an apple. It's the same as B. Let's look at this. It's not an apple if it's not a fruit. What do you think? True or false? Yeah, so which one is A and which one is B? How about that? See if you can do that. Well, you may have noticed that it's in the same format as this one here, right? Da-da-da-da-da, if da-da-da-da-da. There's just a difference of what the da-da-da-da-da is. So this whole thing is going to be B, and this whole thing is going to be A. If it's not a fruit, then it's not an apple. Okay, so this is the conditional, this is the consequent. Condition if it's not a fruit, therefore it's not an apple. What do you think? Is that true? Yeah, again, as long as we're talking about real apples, yeah, that's going to be true. If it's not a fruit, it can't be an apple, because all apples are fruits. Okay? Alright, I'll go ahead and let you take a look at the rest on your own. Hopefully you've already looked at them. He's going to answer them here. Yeah. Alright, so the very last thing we're going to do then is look at the homework. Alright, so here's the homework. It's due this coming Sunday at midnight. So most of these are pretty simple, just me asking you to tell me things about are these premises, are they conclusions? These are back to what an argument is. Yeah, so let's see here. So here on number 4, when I say putting the conclusion first and the premises second, rewrite the argument using English that sounds as natural as possible. What I'm asking you to do is to basically say the same argument in language that wouldn't feel uncomfortable if you were speaking it, to try and say something that sounds natural, but start with the conclusion. See if you can do that. I'm going to talk a little bit here about this one. Number 15, what would need to happen in order for the following statement to be false? If you go to the mall, I'll take you home. How would you know that that's a false statement? What would make that statement a lie? Just getting you to think a little bit more about if-then. We haven't really talked about this, and I don't think that's in the I don't think that's in the text. But I want you to think about it. Just see if you can figure it out. What would make this false? Here in number 16, I ask you to copy-paste the argument that you wrote for homework set of A. The argument that I'm referring to here is the argument for the library research assignment. So if you chose to look at animal ethics, then I asked you to just write an argument about animal ethics. Take that argument from homework set A, put it in here, and now look at it. Now see if you can clearly tell what your conclusion is, what your premises are. Do you even have a conclusion? Just take a look at it now with your wiser eyes, okay? All right, and this last one here is asking you to take this. This is an argument I got from procon.org, I can't recall. Let's see if you can, so this is a website that is supposed to be giving you things in argument form. See how easy it is to tell what the premises are, what the conclusions are. Is there anything that is unnecessary? Are there any sentences that aren't either a premise or a conclusion? All right. As always, if you have any questions, make sure to either send me an email, post something on the forum, or post something on a comment here. Ask your fellow classmates for help. They are a resource too, just as much as I am. All right, well, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.